The crowd inside the gym roared with excitement. Sweat, noise, and pride filled the air. It was Friday night, sparring night, and everyone came to watch one man. Darren Cole. He was the town's golden boy. Tall, powerful, and fast. The kind of fighter who loved the sound of his own name being shouted by fans. Posters of him hung all around the gym, showing him with raised fists, a cocky grin, and his nickname printed below, the King. Darren loved that title. He believed it. He wasn't just a boxer. He was the boxer, undefeated in regional matches, feared by his opponents and adored by his fans. But with every victory, something inside him grew. Not his heart, not his skill, but his arrogance. He started treating boxing less like a sport and more like a stage to feed his ego. He mocked his opponents, insulted anyone who dared to step into the ring with him, and laughed when others failed. Inside the gym, Darren stood in the center of the ring, his gloves shining under the fluorescent lights. His trainer, a tired old man named Rick, watched from the corner with a deep sigh. "Take it easy, Darren," he said quietly. "You don't need to prove anything tonight," but Darren smirked. "Prove? I'm not proving, Rick. I'm reminding them who's king." He looked around at the younger fighters stretching near the walls. Some barely teenagers, he called out loudly. "Hey, who wants to get famous tonight? Come on, someone step up. I'll make you look good for 30 seconds. Laughter filled the gym. The young boxers avoided his gaze, not from respect, but from fear. That's when the gym door opened. The noise died down slightly as a new figure walked in. A slim boy, no older than 16, wearing an old hoodie and carrying a worn pair of gloves. His shoes were too big and his shorts were faded. He stood near the door for a moment, unsure if he should stay. His eyes scanned the room quietly. He didn't speak, he just watched. Rick noticed him and said kindly, "You here for training, kid?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." His voice was soft, almost shy. "My name's Jaden." Before Rick could say more, Darren's mocking voice echoed, "What's this? We got a lost puppy?" The crowd laughed. Jaden looked at the floor, trying to ignore it. Darren leaned against the ropes, smirking. "Hey, kid, this isn't a playground. You sure you're in the right place?" Rick frowned. "Knock it off, Darren," he warned. But Darren kept going. "Relax, coach, I'm just having fun." He looked at Jaden again. "You got gloves, huh? Maybe you're here to clean the ring after I'm done, or wait." His grin widened. "Maybe you want to spar with me?" The gym erupted in laughter. Jaden didn't move, didn't even blink, he just stood still, holding his gloves tighter. Something about his silence made Darren frown. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're scared already," he taunted. "I don't bite, I just break bones." Rick stepped forward. "Enough, Darren," he said sharply. "He's just a kid." But Darren raised his hands, grinning. "A kid? Then what's the harm? I'll show him how real fighters move. Maybe he'll learn something." Jaden finally lifted his head. His eyes met Darren's. Calm, steady, unshaken. "I didn't come here to fight you," he said quietly. "I just came to learn." The gym went silent for a moment. Darren chuckled. "Learn? Oh, you'll learn all right," Rick sighed, rubbing his temples. He'd seen this side of Darren too many times. The arrogance that made people cheer but drove good fighters away. "Leave him be," he said. But Darren was already strapping his gloves tighter. The rest of the fighters gathered around the ring, some whispering, "He's going to destroy that kid. Poor guy doesn't stand a chance." Darren climbed into the ring, bouncing lightly on his feet. "Come on then," he called. "Show us what you've got, or are you just all talk?" Jaden looked at Rick, who shook his head. "You don't have to, son." But Jaden took a slow breath. "It's okay, sir," he said quietly. "I'm not scared." He climbed into the ring. Every step small but firm, the crowd murmured, some amused. Others curious. Darren grinned, tapping his gloves together. "Good choice, kid, don't worry. I'll go easy on you." Jaden didn't respond, he just adjusted his gloves. His eyes were focused, not on Darren's words, but on his movements, the way his shoulders tilted, the rhythm of his feet. The things only real fighters notice. The bell rang. Darren started dancing around him, throwing light jabs. The crowd laughed every time Jaden dodged or flinched. "Come on, swing." Darren shouted, "You scared?" But Jaden didn't swing. He just moved, his body calm, breathing steady. Darren's grin faded slightly. "What are you doing?" He growled, "Fight!" Rick watched carefully. Something about the boy's posture. The way he kept his distance. It wasn't random. It was practiced, controlled. The old man's eyes narrowed. This kid's not just some rookie, he whispered to himself. Darren threw a quick jab, fast and sharp. Jaden slipped to the side effortlessly. The glove missed him by inches. The crowd gasped softly. Darren blinked, confused. Lucky move, he muttered. Throwing another punch this time, Jaden blocked it perfectly. Rick couldn't help but smile a little. Oh boy, he said under his breath. He's got real talent, but Darren's pride didn't see that. It saw challenge. And arrogance never liked challenge. The bell rang again, ending the round. Jaden stepped back, lowering his gloves. Thank you for the round. Sir, he said politely. Darren scowled. Don't thank me yet. I'm just getting started. The crowd clapped lightly, some of them whispering, That kid can move, he's actually good. Rick leaned against the ropes and called out, Darren, enough, you made your point. But Darren wasn't listening anymore. His pride had taken over. He saw in Jaden not a boy, but a mirror, one that showed him the kind of fighter he used to be. Hungry, focused, humble, Jaden climbed down from the ring quietly, wiping sweat from his forehead. He didn't smile, didn't brag. He just looked at Darren one last time and said softly, You don't have to mock people to be great. Sir, Darren froze. The words hit harder than any punch. The crowd went silent. Rick stared, impressed. Darren said nothing. For the first time. The arrogant champion had no clever reply, and though no one realized it yet, that quiet boy with the calm eyes had just begun the fight that would change everything. For Darren, for the gym, and for everyone watching that night. That night, after the tension in the gym faded and the lights went out, Jaden Miller walked home quietly through the empty streets. The air was cool, and the sound of his footsteps echoed softly against the cracked sidewalks. His old gym bag swung by his side, the same one his father used to carry when he was still alive. Jaden's shoes were worn, his knuckles bruised, but his spirit, steady, calm, and determined, burned quietly within him. He lived with his mother in a small apartment on the west side of town. The building was old, the walls thin, but it was home. Inside, his mother, Angela Miller, worked late shifts at a diner and still managed to greet him with a tired smile every night. When Jaden walked in, she looked up from the kitchen table. You went to the boxing gym again, didn't you? She asked softly. Jaden nodded. Yes, Ma, she sighed, brushing sweat from her forehead. I worry about you, Jay, she said gently. You've got such a good heart, I don't want you getting hurt. Jaden smiled faintly. I'm careful, Ma. She looked at him for a long moment. Your father used to say the same thing before every match, she whispered. He had your same eyes, quiet but strong. Jaden's father had been a local boxer, a good one, but never famous. He died in a car accident when Jaden was 8. That day changed everything. Jaden's mother had to work double shifts, and Jaden learned what it meant to grow up too fast, but through it all, one thing stayed with him, his father's words. A fighter doesn't fight to hurt. He fights to endure, every morning before school. Jaden trained in the alley behind their building. He didn't have a proper gym or fancy gloves. Just an old punching bag hung from a rusty pipe and a pair of hand wraps that were falling apart. His rhythm was perfect. Jab, cross, dodge, breathe. His eyes were focused, calm. Every punch carried a piece of his story. The hunger, the loss, the will to rise. Sometimes neighbors passing by would stop and watch. That kid moves like he's been doing this forever, they'd whisper. But Jaden didn't care about attention. He wasn't chasing fame or glory. He was chasing something deeper, self-control. At school he was quiet, polite, and kept to himself. Most of his classmates didn't know he boxed. They only saw the quiet boy who never got angry, never argued. Some took his silence for weakness. But Jaden never let words touch him. After classes, he'd go straight to the abandoned gym near the edge of town, a place filled with dust, old posters and echoes of forgotten fights there. He practiced alone for hours sometimes. He'd put on his headphones and listen to recordings of boxing commentaries. Studying how legends moved, he mimicked their stances, their timing, their patience. But behind every punch, there was also pain. He missed his father. He missed the life they could have had. And every time he threw a jab, it was like he was talking to him. I'm still trying. Dad, he'd whisper under his breath. One evening while training, his mother appeared at the doorway of the gym. Her arms folded. You'll wear yourself out, she said gently. Jaden stopped, breathing heavily. I can't stop, Ma. Not yet. Angela looked at him with soft eyes. Why do you keep pushing yourself so hard? He wiped his forehead and smiled faintly. Because one day, I want people to know that you raised a fighter. Not the kind who hits people, but the kind who never gives up, she smiled, tears forming. You already are that kind of fighter. Jay, she whispered that night after she went to bed. Jaden sat by the window, staring at the distant city lights. He thought about Darren, the arrogant boxer from the gym. He thought about how easily he mocked people, how sure he was that strength came from fame and fear. Jaden didn't hate him, but something inside him whispered one day, I'll show him what real strength looks like. The next morning, Jaden woke up before sunrise and went for a run. His breath puffed in the cold air. His shoes slapped against the pavement rhythmically. Every step felt like a promise. He wasn't training for revenge. He was training for respect, not from others, but from himself. That afternoon, he returned to the same gym the moment he stepped inside. The chatter died down. Darren was already there, laughing with his group. When he saw Jaden walk in again, his grin widened. Look who's back, he said. The quiet kid with too much courage. Jaden didn't reply. He simply bowed his head slightly and began wrapping his hands. Darren's smirk faded a little. You actually came back? He said, didn't I scare you off yesterday? Jaden looked up calmly. You can't scare someone who's not afraid to start from the bottom. A few of the younger fighters murmured in surprise. No one had ever talked back to Darren like that. Darren tilted his head, intrigued. You've got guts? I'll give you that, he said. Maybe I'll give you a real match next time, just for fun. Jaden nodded. If that's what you want, sir, he said simply, then turned away to start training. His punches hit the bag in a steady rhythm. Fast, sharp, controlled Rick. The trainer stood nearby, quietly observing him. He could see something in the boy that Darren couldn't. Not arrogance, but raw potential, discipline, and humility. As Jaden continued punching, the sound echoed through the gym like a heartbeat. Boom, 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 and every strike louder than words. Everyone in the room could feel it. Even Darren, though he'd never admit it that evening. As the lights dimmed and the gym emptied, Rick called out, Kid, Jaden turned. You keep training like that, and one day, you won't need to prove anything to anyone. Jaden smiled quietly. That's the plan, sir. And as he left the gym, the old wooden door closing behind him, one thing was clear, something had begun. The boy the world ignored was slowly becoming the kind of fighter the world would never forget. Days passed and word began to spread through the gym about the quiet boy who had stood up to Darren Cole. Some called him brave, others called him foolish. But no matter what they said, everyone agreed on one thing. There was something different about Jaden Miller. The boy didn't talk much, but when he moved, every step, every strike, every breath carried focus. Darren didn't forget him either. He didn't like being ignored, and even less being quietly challenged. His pride itched like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Whenever he saw Jaden training, he'd make sure to comment loud enough for everyone to hear. Careful, kid, those gloves look heavy for a dreamer, or, you sure you're not punching above your level? The other fighters laughed, trying to impress Darren. But Jaden stayed calm, never replying, never breaking focus. That silence bothered Darren more than insults ever could. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to see fear, but Jaden gave him none. One Friday evening, the gym was packed. The owner had invited locals to watch the sparring matches. It was supposed to be fun, but Darren saw it as an opportunity. He leaned against the ropes. Scanning the room, his eyes landed on Jaden, who was quietly helping younger kids wrap their hands before training. Perfect, Darren muttered under his breath. Let's give the audience a little show. Rick, the old trainer, sensed something brewing. He pulled Darren aside. Don't do it, he warned. The boy's here to learn, not to be your punching bag. Darren grinned. Relax, old man. I'm just teaching him what real boxing looks like. But Rick had trained Darren long enough to recognize that glint in his eye. It wasn't confidence. It was ego. And ego was dangerous. When the sparring matches began, the crowd clapped and cheered. Fighters stepped into the ring, exchanging light blows, learning timing and control. It was routine, until Darren suddenly stepped forward, raising his gloves. All right, he said loudly. Who's next? Who's brave enough to face the king? The gym went quiet. No one moved. Most fighters avoided eye contact. Then Darren's gaze landed on Jaden, standing near the corner with his hands wrapped. Watching silently, you, Darren said, pointing straight at him. Come on, kid. Let's see what you've got, Jaden blinked. Me? Yeah, you, Darren taunted. You've been walking around like you've got something to prove. Let's see it, Rick stepped forward. No, he said firmly. He's not ready, Darren. This isn't a fair match, but the crowd was already whispering. Phone's already out. He's really gonna fight the kid? This is crazy. Darren knew he had them. He smirked. Come on, Jaden, don't be shy. You wanted to train with the best. Here's your chance. Jaden looked at Rick, who gave him a long, worried glance. You don't owe him anything. Son, the old man said quietly. Jaden hesitated, but then looked at Darren, the man who mocked others, who used his strength to belittle instead of inspire. I'm not here to prove anything, he said softly. But if stepping into the ring means I can earn respect, then I'll do it. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Rick sighed deeply. All right, kid. Remember what I told you. Stay calm. Protect your rhythm, Jaden nodded, climbing into the ring. The ropes creaked under his light frame. The air was heavy with tension. Darren bounced on his feet, grinning. Don't worry. I'll go easy on you, he said mockingly. Jaden adjusted his gloves, his expression calm. You don't have to, he said quietly. The bell rang. Darren lunged forward instantly, throwing light, teasing jabs. He wasn't trying to hurt the boy, not yet. He just wanted to make him look foolish. Jaden dodged the first two punches effortlessly. His movements small but clean. Darren chuckled. Not bad, he said. Throwing a quick hook, Jaden ducked beneath it. The crowd murmured, He dodged that?
Did you see that?
Jaden's eyes were focused not on Darren's face, but on his shoulders, on his breathing, on the rhythm of his steps. Every time Darren moved, Jaden read it like a book. He didn't fight to win, he fought to understand. Darren started to grow frustrated. His jabs turned sharper. His swings heavier. Come on, hit me, he barked. You scared? Jaden didn't answer. He stepped aside, blocking a punch with perfect timing. Rick leaned on the ropes, his voice low but proud. That boy's been watching, learning everything. The crowd's laughter had faded now, replaced by awe. The arrogant boxer was chasing a boy who refused to fight back, yet somehow was always one step ahead. Finally, Darren swung hard. A right hook meant to end it. Jaden ducked again and for the first time countered. His glove landed against Darren's ribs. Not strong, not cruel, just enough to sting. The sound echoed in the room. The crowd gasped. Darren froze, eyes wide. His grin vanished. Jaden stepped back immediately. Lowering his hands, You said you'd go easy, he said quietly. So did I. A few people laughed softly, not out of mockery, but disbelief. The boy had just humbled the champion without showing aggression. Rick couldn't hide his smile anymore. He clapped once and said, That's enough, both of you. But Darren's pride was burning. He raised his gloves again. No, we're not done, he snapped. Jaden's eyes didn't change. He stood his ground, calm as ever. Yes, we are, he said, and stepped out of the ring. The gym went silent. No one laughed this time. No one cheered. Darren stood frozen, still breathing hard. The boy he wanted to embarrass had just walked away with quiet dignity, leaving him standing in his own pride. As Jaden grabbed his bag to leave, Rick called out, Good work. Son? Jaden nodded with a small smile. Thank you, sir. And as he walked out of the gym, everyone's eyes followed him for the first time. They weren't looking at the champion. They were looking at the boy who had just shown what true strength looked like. That night, Darren sat alone in the locker room, staring at his gloves. The cheers and laughter he once loved were gone. All he could hear was the echo of that quiet voice saying, You don't have to go easy. It was the first crack in his arrogance. And deep down, Darren knew this wasn't over yet. The real fight had just begun. The next day, the gym felt different. The air wasn't filled with laughter or noise like before. Instead, there was a quiet tension that no one wanted to name. The story of what happened between Darren Cole and Jaden Miller had spread across town. Some said Darren went too far. Others said the boy embarrassed him. Either way, everyone knew one thing. Something had changed inside the king. When Darren walked into the gym that morning, heads turned but no one cheered. The usual greetings were replaced with awkward silence. Even Rick, his trainer, only gave a small nod. Darren pretended not to notice, but deep down, the silence hurt more than any punch. In the far corner, Jaden was already training. His movements were smooth, quiet, and focused. Every jab hit the bag with perfect rhythm, steady, controlled, strong. Darren watched him from across the room. There was no arrogance in the boy, no pride, just peace. That calmness bothered Darren more than anything. "Hey kid," Darren called out finally. His voice echoed through the gym. Jaden stopped and looked at him. Darren tried to smirk. "You got lucky yesterday," Jaden simply replied. "Maybe," and went back to hitting the bag. That simple answer made Darren's jaw tighten. No fear, no attitude. Just calm confidence for the first time. Darren felt something unfamiliar, an insecurity. Rick approached Darren quietly. "You should let it go," he said. "The boy's got something special, and you could learn from him if you stopped trying to prove you're better." Darren frowned. "Learn? From a kid?" Rick's eyes were tired but wise. Maybe not in strength. But in spirit, Darren looked away, pretending not to hear, but the words stayed in his mind. Days went by, Jaden kept training, and Darren kept watching, sometimes late at night. When everyone else had gone home, Darren found himself shadowboxing in front of the mirror, replaying that moment in his head. The boy's quiet moves, his unshaken focus, and that single word, maybe, it haunted him one Friday evening. The gym hosted a local exhibition match, a small event where boxers sparred to raise money for youth programs. Darren was invited to headline. The posters read, "The King Returns," and for a while his confidence returned too. He promised himself he'd remind everyone why he was champion. The gym was packed, people cheered, cameras flashed. Darren wrapped his hands and smiled at his reflection in the mirror. But something inside him felt hollow. He thought about Jaden and that stillness, that composure, that strange kind of power that didn't come from muscle, but from within. Before the main event began, Rick approached him again. "Don't do this for pride," he said. "Do it for passion," Darren forced a smile. "It's the same thing," he said. But he knew it wasn't as the matches began. Darren watched the other fighters. His eyes suddenly caught sight of Jaden, sitting quietly in the front row beside his mother, Angela. The boy's face was calm as ever, but when he saw Darren look his way, he nodded respectfully. Darren looked away quickly, a strange feeling twisting in his chest. When his name was called, Darren stepped into the ring. The crowd roared like before. He threw his hands up, soaking in the sound, but this time it didn't feel the same. It felt empty. The bell rang, and his opponent, a strong, young fighter from another gym, stepped forward. Darren threw his usual fast jabs. Sharp and confident, the first round went smoothly. But by the second round, the young fighter caught his rhythm. He moved fast like Jaden had, precise and unpredictable. Darren grew frustrated, swinging harder, losing focus. "Stay calm," Rick shouted from the corner, but Darren couldn't. His pride was louder than his coach's voice. He kept chasing the punches, trying to overpower the kid. And in doing so, he forgot his technique. The crowd gasped when Darren took a clean hit to the jaw. His head snapped back, the sound echoed through the gym. He stumbled, dazed, breathing hard for the first time in years. He felt panic. Rick yelled, "Breathe, Darren, focus!" And then, through the blur of lights and noise, Darren saw something that froze him. Jaden was standing near the ring, calm, focused, nodding slowly. Their eyes met, and for 1 second, Darren heard the unspoken message in that silent nod. Control, not anger. He straightened his stance, took a deep breath, and steadied his rhythm. His next moves were slower, cleaner, precise. He stopped trying to destroy and started trying to learn. The match went the full distance. Neither man was knocked out. The crowd clapped wildly, but Darren didn't raise his fists this time. He simply bowed his head to his opponent and said, "Good fight." That night, as the gym emptied, Jaden stayed behind, quietly cleaning up the gloves and water bottles. Darren walked over, exhausted but calm. "You came to watch me lose, huh?" he said with a faint smile. Jaden looked up, shaking his head. "No, sir," he said softly. "I came to see if you'd find your balance." Darren stared at him for a long moment, then laughed quietly. "You talk like a teacher." Jaden smiled. "I just remember what my father taught me. The best fighter isn't the one who hits the hardest. It's the one who stays in control." Darren nodded slowly. "Your old man was a smart man." Jaden's smile faded slightly. "He was," he said quietly. "And I think you could be too, if you let go of your anger." Those words sank deep, deeper than any punch Darren had ever taken. For years he had fought to prove himself to others. But for the first time he wondered, who was he really fighting? As Darren walked out into the cool night air, he felt something strange. Peace. Not victory, not defeat, just peace. And as he looked back at the gym, he saw Jaden helping younger fighters pack up their gear, guiding them patiently. It hit him then. The boy he had mocked was not just a fighter. He was what Darren had always wanted to be. Someone who didn't need applause to be strong. Someone who didn't fight for pride, but for purpose. And for the first time in his career, Darren Cole realized that the real fight had never been inside the ring. It had always been within himself. Weeks passed after that night, and something inside Darren Cole began to shift. He still came to the gym every morning, but not as the loud, arrogant fighter who demanded attention. He came quietly now, sometimes before sunrise, when the gym was still half dark and silent. The echoes of his gloves hitting the bag were no longer fueled by pride, but by something purer. For the first time in years, Darren trained like a beginner again. He listened to Rick's advice, corrected his stance, practiced breathing, balance, and timing. The same things he used to mock others for. He had been the strongest man in the room, yet somehow the weakest in spirit now. He was learning what true strength really meant. Jaden noticed the change before anyone else. Every day when he arrived, he'd see Darren training alone, sweat pouring down his face. No smirks, no jokes, just focus sometimes. They would nod to each other silently. That small gesture said more than words ever could. One afternoon after the gym emptied out, Darren approached Jaden. "You've got a good rhythm, kid," he said quietly. Jaden looked up from the punching bag. Surprised, "Thank you." "Sir?" Darren smiled faintly. "Don't call me sir. You've earned that right." Jaden laughed softly. "Habit." They stood there for a moment. The sound of the heavy bag swinging between them, Darren finally spoke. "You know, I used to think being feared was the same as being respected," he said. "Turns out fear only lasts until someone stronger comes along. Respect, that lasts forever." Jaden nodded. "That's what my dad used to say." Darren's expression softened. "Your father must have been a wise man." "He was," Jaden said. "He always told me, you can't control what people call you, but you can control what you answer to." Darren chuckled quietly. "Sounds like something I needed to hear 10 years ago." After that day, something unusual began happening. Darren and Jaden started training together. At first, it drew attention. The arrogant champion and the humble boy, side by side. Punching bags in rhythm, Rick watched from the corner, shaking his head with a proud smile. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered. The gym's atmosphere changed too. The fighters who once laughed at others started training more seriously. Some even approached Jaden for advice, and he helped them patiently. No ego, no attitude, just kindness. One evening, Rick announced that a charity exhibition was being organized, a friendly boxing match to raise funds for underprivileged kids. The idea was to show that boxing wasn't just about fists, but about community. When Rick asked for volunteers, Darren was the first to raise his hand. "Put me in," he said, "but this time, I don't want a rival, I want a partner." The crowd looked confused. "What do you mean?" Rick asked. Darren turned to Jaden. "Me and the kid, side by side, 2 versus 2 for the charity match." Jaden blinked. "You want to fight with me?" Darren smiled. "I think it's time I fought for something good." The news spread fast. The former arrogant champion teaming up with the boy he once mocked. People were curious, excited. The event drew a big crowd, kids, parents, and even people who had once booed Darren came to watch on the night of the match. The gym lights glowed bright. The energy was electric. Darren and Jaden stood in the ring, wearing matching gloves and simple black shirts. Across from them stood 2 strong fighters from a rival gym. But Darren wasn't nervous for the first time. He wasn't fighting against someone. He was fighting for something. The bell rang. The match began. The rhythm between Darren and Jaden was perfect. Jaden's quick footwork and speed matched Darren's power and precision. Every move they made flowed like water. The crowd cheered not for dominance but for teamwork. At one point, Darren took a hit to the ribs. He stumbled slightly. But before he could lose balance, Jaden stepped in and blocked the next punch with flawless timing. Darren grinned through the pain. "You're fast, kid." Jaden smiled. "You taught me patience, round after round." They moved as one, like teacher and student, like brothers. The fight wasn't about victory, it was about redemption. When the final bell rang, both teams bowed to each other. The crowd erupted in applause, cameras flashed. Chants filled the air. "Respect. Respect." Afterward, Darren stood at the center of the ring. Microphone in hand. "You all know who I used to be," he said. The man who thought arrogance made him strong. But this boy, this young man, taught me that real strength is in humility, in respect and in heart. He turned to Jaden and put a hand on his shoulder. "He's not just a fighter. He's the kind of person this sport needs more of." The crowd cheered louder. Jaden smiled shyly, lowering his head. After the event, they sat outside the gym under the night sky. The city lights flickered in the distance. Darren exhaled deeply. "Feels good to do something right for once," Jaden nodded. "You've always had that in you, you just forgot where it was." Darren laughed softly. "You sound like an old soul," Jaden smiled. "Maybe I just learned early what others learn late." Rick stepped out, handing them water bottles. "You two make a good team," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever see Darren Cole smiling after a match instead of posing." Darren chuckled. "Guess I'm still learning, Coach." That night, as they all locked up the gym and walked home, the air felt different. Lighter. Peaceful. For the first time in a long time, Darren didn't feel like a man trying to prove something. He felt like a man who had finally understood something. The crowd had once called him the king, but that night, Darren realized that true kings don't rule others. They lead by example. And beside him, the quiet boy who once stood in his shadow now walked as his equal. Side by side, in perfect rhythm, a few months passed after the charity match, and the little boxing gym that once echoed with arrogance and laughter now echoed with respect and unity. The energy had changed. People came not to show off, but to learn. Darren and Jaden had unknowingly become the heart of that change. Every morning they trained together. Their routines were sharp, disciplined, and filled with quiet focus. The arrogant man and the humble boy had turned into partners. Brothers in spirit, Jaden's technique kept improving. His punches faster, his footwork cleaner, his timing perfect. But even more impressive was Darren's transformation. The man who once fought for applause now fought for purpose. Rick often watched them from the side, shaking his head with a proud smile. "Never thought I'd see Darren Cole teach a kid patience," he'd whisper to himself. That boy really changed him. One morning, after their usual workout, Darren leaned against the ropes, watching Jaden practice with two younger kids. He smiled. "You've got the gift, kid," he said. "They listen to you." Jaden wiped sweat from his forehead. "They just need someone to believe in them," he said softly. "Like you and Rick believed in me," Darren chuckled. "Belief's easy. Earning it, that's the hard part." But deep inside, Darren was proud. He had found something he didn't even know he was missing. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from forgiveness, not from winning. One afternoon, Rick gathered everyone at the gym, holding a piece of paper. "Got news," he announced. "There's going to be a regional boxing tournament next month. They're inviting amateurs and semi-pros. It's a big deal. Could be the start of something for any of you." The room buzzed with excitement. Darren smiled but said nothing. He wasn't interested in fame anymore. But Jaden, his eyes lit up, not from pride but from hope. "Do you think I can join, Coach?" he asked eagerly. Rick smiled. "Son, you don't just join, you belong there." Darren stepped forward. "He's ready," he said. "I'll train him personally." Jaden blinked. "You'll train me?" Darren nodded. "If you'll let me." And so began weeks of intense preparation. Dawn to dusk they trained. Darren taught Jaden advanced techniques, defensive slips, counterpunching, energy conservation. But he also taught him things that went beyond boxing. "You're not fighting the man in front of you," he'd say. "You're fighting the doubts inside you." Jaden took every word to heart. He trained until his knuckles bruised, his muscles burned, and his lungs begged for air. But he never complained. Not once. Darren would smile at him and say, "That pain? That's your body getting stronger." The tournament day came faster than anyone expected. The arena was packed, bright lights shining down on the ring. The crowd was loud, chanting names, cheering fighters. Jaden sat in the locker room, his gloves in his lap. His heart pounding in his chest, Darren knelt beside him, tying the straps on his gloves carefully. "Remember what I told you," Darren said quietly. "Don't fight with anger, fight with focus. You've got nothing to prove. Just something to show," Jaden nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'll make you proud," Darren smiled faintly. "You already have." When Jaden entered the ring, the noise was overwhelming. His opponent was older, taller, and clearly more experienced. The first round was tough. Jaden took a few solid hits, but he didn't lose his calm. He moved gracefully, his eyes sharp, watching every movement. In the second round, something changed. Jaden's rhythm kicked in. His punches found their target. Smooth, precise, powerful. The crowd began to cheer his name. "Jaden, Jaden!" The sound fueled him, but not in a prideful way. It reminded him why he was there. Not to win for himself, but for everyone who believed in him. In the third and final round, Jaden and his opponent traded punches like lightning, sweat flying through the air. The tension was electric, every move was instinct. Every breath a fight. Then, in the last 10 seconds, Jaden slipped a right hook and countered with a clean jab to the jaw. The crowd erupted, the bell rang, the fight was over. The referee raised Jaden's arm, winner by decision. The gym went wild. Darren jumped to his feet. Clapping with pride, Rick had tears in his eyes. When Jaden stepped out of the ring, Darren met him halfway, wrapping him in a hug. "You did it, kid," he whispered. "You really did it." Jaden smiled through tears. "We did it," he said. "You trained me." That night, after the tournament, the team went back to the gym. The trophy sat on the counter, simple, silver, and shining. Everyone laughed, shared food, and celebrated. But when the crowd thinned out, Darren sat alone near the ring, looking at the gloves hanging by the ropes. Jaden walked over quietly. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Darren smiled softly. "You know, years ago, I thought boxing was about beating others. Turns out, it's about beating your own past." Jaden nodded. "Then I think you've won your biggest fight." Darren looked at him, eyes glistening. "Maybe I did." As they left the gym that night, Darren turned off the lights one by one. The place that had once been filled with noise and arrogance was now filled with peace and purpose. Outside, the stars shone bright above the city. Jaden looked up and said, "You ever think about what comes next?" Darren smiled. "Yeah," he said, "teaching the next kid who walks in scared, just like you did." And as they walked down the quiet street, side by side, the sound of their laughter echoed softly through the night. The arrogant boxer was gone. The boy who once stood in the corner was now a champion. And together, they had built something stronger than victory. They had built respect, forgiveness, and legacy. Months turned into years, and the little boxing gym that once smelled of sweat and pride became a place of hope and discipline. Posters of fighters lined the walls, but one picture hung higher than the rest. A photo of Darren Cole and Jaden Miller, side by side holding a small silver trophy, both smiling with the kind of pride that comes not from victory but from growth. People still remembered the story, how an arrogant boxer once mocked a young black boy, and how that same boy later became the reason the boxer changed his life. The tale spread through the city, inspiring hundreds of kids to step into that same gym, not to fight others but to fight their fears. Darren was no longer the man he used to be. He had opened his own youth boxing program, calling it the Respect Project. Every day he'd walk into the gym, surrounded by laughter, not cheers for him, but encouragement for others. "Hands up, chin down, breathe," he'd say, walking around the mats, guiding nervous students, correcting stances with patience. And by his side, just like always, was Jaden. Now taller, stronger, and wiser, the student had become a teacher too, helping the younger ones with the same gentle calm that once silenced a room full of mockers. One afternoon after training, Darren and Jaden sat on the worn-out bench outside the gym, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and orange. Darren leaned back, his hands behind his head. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. Jaden chuckled. "Every day," he said. "You used to yell at everyone, remember?" Darren laughed. "And you used to barely talk." They both smiled quietly. The street was calm. The sound of kids laughing from the park nearby carried in the breeze. Darren looked down at his hands. The same hands that once hurt people, now used to teach, to protect, to build. "Funny thing," he said softly. "The thing that used to make me proud, my fists, are the same thing that made me humble." Jaden nodded. "Because strength isn't what you have, it's what you choose to do with it." Darren looked at him and smiled. "You always were the wiser one," Jaden shrugged. "I had a good teacher." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade, and then Darren spoke again. "You ever think about your dad?" Jaden looked toward the horizon. "Every time I step into the ring," he said, "I feel like he's there watching. I used to think I needed to win for him, but now I think he just wanted me to stay kind. No matter how hard life hits." Darren nodded slowly, his voice low. "You did more than that, kid." You taught others to be kind too, even me. As evening turned into night, the gym door creaked open behind them, and a small boy stepped out, maybe 10 years old. He held a pair of oversized gloves and said shyly, Mr. Darren, Mr. Jaden, can you teach me how to fight like you guys? Darren smiled and motioned for him to come closer. We can teach you how to fight, he said. But first we'll teach you how to listen, how to breathe, and how to respect. The boy nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. Jaden grinned, remembering the first day he stood in that same spot. Scared, mocked, and underestimated, he looked at the boy and said, Don't worry, kid. We'll start with the basics. Control, calm, and confidence. The three of them walked back into the gym. The lights flickered on, the air filled with the soft sounds of gloves hitting the bag. Darren and Jaden watched the boy practice his first jab. Awkward and clumsy but full of heart, Darren turned to Jaden and whispered, That was you once, Jaden smiled, and that was you, he said, pointing to the heavy bag. Loud, proud, and unstoppable, Darren laughed. Guess we both learned something, huh? Jaden nodded. Yeah, that respect hits harder than any punch. The sound of laughter filled the gym again, echoing through the same walls that once heard arrogance and mockery. Now those echoes carried something new. Legacy. Later that night, when the lights were off and the gym was quiet again, Darren stood alone for a moment, looking at the ring. He placed his hand on the ropes and whispered, Thank you. Kid, he wasn't talking to Jaden anymore. He was talking to his younger self, the one who needed to fall to learn how to rise. Outside, the stars glittered above the quiet city. Darren locked the gym doors, and as he walked home, he smiled softly because, in the end, it wasn't the wins or the trophies that defined him. It was the lesson that one boy taught him. That true strength doesn't come from power. It comes from respect, humility, and heart. And as long as that gym stood, that story of a proud man, a quiet boy, and the unthinkable change that united them would live forever, whispered in every punch, every breath, and every dream that began between those ropes.